Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Empowering education with Easy4U, where innovation meets accessibility. Our subscription-based offering not only equips schools with cutting-edge devices, but revolutionises the learning experience by eliminating financial barriers, streamlining support, and embracing technology. We're not just providing tools, we're shaping a future where every student can thrive, unburdened by limitations. Easy4U, transforming education, one device at a time. Find out more at www.easy4u.school.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Reading Solutions UK. Are you looking for best practices and innovative strategies to foster confident, lifelong readers? Join the free online International Reading Conference on the 11th, 12th and 13th of June. Hear from speakers like TV personality and education expert Basit Siddiqui, beloved children's author Michael Rosen, fluency expert Tim Rosinski, EEF specialist Chloe Butlin, the National Literacy Trust's Irene Picton, and a range of experienced practitioners, including MAT leaders, deputy heads, heads of English, high-level teaching assistants, and school librarians. Through the three-day conference, speakers will explore a range of topics at the forefront of the current educational landscape, with sessions relevant for all educators and key stages. Visit Reading Solutions at readingsolutionsuk.co.uk for more information and to sign up for this free conference.
Good evening and welcome to tonight's live show on tackling digital poverty, promoting digital literacy and making education accessible on Teachers Talk Radio in conjunction for Easy4U. I'm your host, James Rabin, and alongside me, I have Tom Rogers as we explore the critical issue of digital poverty and how to make education more accessible. How are you, Tom, this evening?
Very well, thank you. You okay, James?
Yes, I am excited.
Don't want you getting that guitar out, James, and playing it at any point. That's strictly banned.
Just wait for the other one on the other side that you can't see at the moment. It's hiding.
That's not going to happen at any point, just to reassure everyone.
Oh, yeah, you don't want me singing. Definitely not that. And from Easy4U, we have Simon and Sagar. Good evening, and how are you both?
Good evening, James. Very well, thank you. Good evening, Tom.
Evening, all. Very well.
And Laura as well, who I know I've talked to before on many occasions about education technology. She specialises in that digital strategy and has got a really rich experience, both in the maintained and independent sector as well. So how are you, Laura, this evening?
Yeah, really well. Thanks very much. Lovely to be back.
Brilliant. Now, Easy4U is where innovation meets accessibility, and their subscription-based offering not only equips schools with cutting-edge devices, but revolutionise that learning experience. And we're going to find out a lot more about them this evening. Now, for all of our listeners out there, it'd be really interesting just to hear about your role and what you do before we really dive into what Easy4U does, the digital divide, how COVID's really made a big difference in the education sector, especially in the UK when we're looking at digital devices. So, Simon, can I start with you? Tell us a little bit about yourself, your passion, and that as well.
Sure, thank you, James. Good evening to you all. So I have been with Easy for You since November 23, so not a massive amount of time, but I have been in the education sector 12, 13 years worth of experience. First and foremost, I'm a dad to my two boys, Finley at 14 and Bobby is 5. So this really resonates with me, the whole Easy for You proposition. I went through that, I want to say, damaging journey, difficult journey with Finley during COVID. He was in year 5, going into year 6. Lots of lost learning and challenges at home. So when Sagar contacted me, being my boss, I was like, I love this idea. I want to make a positive difference. So yeah, really enjoying my time here so far.
Did you do any teaching, Simon?
Any teaching?
Yeah. Did you do it?
Matt, the honest answer to that is, Tom, I did my absolute best. Was I homeschooling ready? The answer is a fundamental no. Tom, I hadn't used Teams before COVID.
Really?
Bear in mind, I was selling day to day, Monday to Friday. I'd sit 3 or 4 meetings a day across the UK, face to face, personable, all that sort of thing. And then all of a sudden, I have to teach my son Teams, let alone myself. So I did my best, Tom. Did my best.
Epic.
I know you, Sagar, you've got some experience of being an IT network manager as well. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I've been with Class Technology. That's we're part of Easy, which is part of Easy for You, for 23 years now. So I've been in state and independent education in terms of supporting schools with digital transformation, a bit in digital strategy, as well as how to build bespoke one-to-one schemes that are effective for their learners. So I'm a techie at heart, so I really like to get under the hood of what's going on and how we can kind of drive technology moving forwards. But I was looking after a school during when COVID hit, and that was challenging, but I really enjoyed it because it put so much transformation in of technology in a really short space of time. So there was a lot to learn, and that was kind of the best part of it, that we got to learn and share and try to do some great things in incredibly challenging time for everyone. But I feel that now we've come through that, we've got some really good experience, and we need to find ways to hold on to that.
Fantastic. And I know, Laura, you've done an awful lot with digital transformation with schools over the last few years as well. So do you want to tell us a little bit about where your passion is for using technology?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So I've been in education for 20 years, and so and started out as a linguist, actually, a very geeky one, but a linguist at heart. But I have ended up teaching, I teach children when people ask me what I teach, but I teach some computer science and IT. I've taught PSHE, I've taught all sorts of things. But I think what I'm really interested in is how technology can leverage all sorts of interesting possibilities in education. I see it as a really interesting catalyst for improvement, whether that's in terms of opportunities or systems and processes or just efficiency, but also just opening up possibilities for learning for kids. So I think I'm really interested in flourishing and creating great learning experiences for young people, but also amazing learning experiences for staff as lifelong learners too. So I'm really passionate about making sure that we are as expansive and generous and open with those possibilities as we can be, which I think is pretty much aligned with the goals today.
And it's one of those interesting things. We've all found something, whether it's through COVID or whether we have seen the possibilities of technology, that we want to instill in others and get them to open their eyes, or it's a frustration, like you said, Simon, with trying to teach with Teams or Finley at home. And I've got 3 young kids myself, and I know when I'm seeing them in school, I want to make a difference. So, Simon, can you tell me a little bit more about Easy for You? And its core mission, because I know we've touched on parts of this already.
Sure, yeah. So as part of Class Technology Solutions, the main mission at Easy for You is to make education both accessible and affordable for everyone. And we do that via our one-to-one device scheme. So at Easy for You, we absolutely recognise that students, without computers, without laptops, without access to technology, are in fact being left behind, which is obviously a concern for all of us as parents and teachers. And in terms of access, that could be learning and teaching within the classroom itself. But I also think about, the extension beyond there, having that sort of detrimental effect for learning outcomes. So why do we go to school? We go to school to prepare for our future, don't we? So those with, let's say, gaps in their ICT skills will invariably have less opportunity when it comes to exploring further education, and when it comes to ultimately looking at what do I want to do in my life, so future opportunities within the employment world. So yeah, many tools now for a student are indeed online, and for them to achieve the success that they have in them, they really need access to those tools. My eldest Finley, currently, he's revising. That is 100% online revision. His homework, certainly since COVID, has been, I'd say, 98% online. Within schools themselves, I know that some exams are now going online, and conversations I've had very recently with certain schools whereby they only have as little as 20, 25 devices within their school, they've got decisions to make. How are we going to allow these students to be able to go online and fulfill these exams? So yeah, children without access are arguably being locked out of parts of their education. And the fact for me is, in an increasingly digitized landscape where online learning is now, I'm going to say, essential. It's not, I'll show my age a little bit. Back in the day when it was a very nice to have, and mum and dad took me to stationery box late August, beginning of September for a pen and pencil. Now very much a laptop, or similar device, and access to technology is absolutely essential. So yeah, I think the best device I had was a scientific calculator. I'm sure I've still got it somewhere. But all jokes apart, despite knowing that change is a necessity, and schools do admit that, I find it still quite an overwhelming conversation or subject matter for some schools. So when I go into a school or a trust or a college and start having these discussions, questions invariably arise. And the first one's usually, where do we start? Simon, please help us. And at that point, okay, I'm easy for you, I'm Mr. One-to-One, but it's not about one-to-one right at that moment. For me, there's a much bigger animal and much bigger picture there. So I personally go down the route of, that holistic business approach being the right strategy. And I'd certainly welcome, in a couple of minutes, Laura's input on that with her vast experience. And then, once we've got stakeholders aligned, connected, and we've got that sort of shared vision, then we can move forwards with the expertise of Easy for You. So, we can talk about which operating system is going to work for that particular school, which devices fit, how do we make it affordable for all parents? How can we make it accessible for all students? Questions around devices breaking. And then, we can get into the, how much time, work, planning is this going to take? And ultimately, that's where our experience at Easy for You helps each educational institution move forwards.
I think that's the key thing. I'd say, Guy, I'm really interested in your experience during COVID and working within a school, and how that experience with trying to get a school up to scratch, basically, and go to online learning almost overnight, and what some of the problems you saw, especially with that access, that theme that Simon picked up there. So it'd be really interesting to hear from you.
So yeah, it was a real big challenge. Besides, though we know technology's there within the classrooms, it was never truly effectively used. To go to that remote model, there was quite a lot of spinning plates that we had to try to work out. So making sure every staff member had a baseline in terms of using the technology, how they would use that to actually teach those lessons, how we'd put that content available somewhere that everyone could access, that was a safe space, that had all those safeguarding measures that you could do, which had never been done before, mind you, to extend into a home, and then all the challenges around that. So if we just take the the side of the school side of things of putting that content in there, we in the school that I was at, we were quite in a fortunate place compared to others where we had the infrastructure in place. We had the consultancy, we had big specialists like Laura in terms of, you know, where's the next way to go? What do we need to look at doing to become that future school? So we were in a better position, but there was a lot of training that was involved, and it's making sure that everyone understands how to use that approach. But I think the challenges that I found as an IT person was making sure that everyone had the time to learn those tools, and then to give them access to that equipment. So a lot of what we did was take classroom machines and repurpose them to then deliver to students, to staff members, not besides thinking that they may not even have the internet connection to deliver those lessons. So that was a real challenge. But the way the technology helped with that was with enhancing the engagement. And that was a real important element for that to be successful.
And just thinking about that idea of digital divide, and it's one of those things that I know very conscious of at the moment. With COVID has opened the eyes, and as you said, you had to repurpose technology. The DfE even had schemes of putting devices within schools, which, if anything, were more of a paperweight. They did the first initial fix. Here's the engagement, as you said, but they weren't really a long-term solution within it at all. And what is happening, which is unfortunately what you see within lots of schools, is, well, they get frustrated, they're not being used, they spend time logging on, and those devices aren't really fit for purpose. But let's go back to that digital divide section, and that idea of that digital poverty within schools, because there are financial pressures, and I know we'll get onto that later on in particular, but that access for technology for remote work or education, healthcare services, even trying to book a GP appointment nowadays, you need technology to phone up or call back or even book on there. But there are still people within the UK who don't have internet access or don't have access to actually high speed. And Laura, I wondered what your experience is with that idea of digital poverty, through your experience of working with other schools and your concerns behind that as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there are a couple of things that I think are really interesting here. The first is that throwing devices at the problem on their own is not a solution to anything. And I think if the kind of COVID emergency provision taught us anything, it's taught us that the device as a standalone actually sometimes even causes more problems than provides solutions. And I think especially now we're seeing those devices aging out of circulation, those ones that were sort of airlifted in, and leaving a gap behind. There's a real sense that a holistic strategy is definitely needed. Connectivity is actually at the heart of that, and before you even begin to go shopping, you've got to look at that whole sort of infrastructure and system stuff in place, and make sure that you've got the culture, make sure that you've got the buy-in from your staff and everybody, because it's just not enough to go shopping on its own. And I think that's I'm interested in what you've got to say about this, you know, from an Easy For You perspective, because I really think that sort of whole strategic approach has so much power, and can really help to narrow the gap by making sure that the changes that you make are sustainable, and by making sure that the money that you spend is spent really well. So there's nothing that's wasted, there's nothing that's gathering dust. We're not buying paperweights. We're making sure that the tools that we're providing are meaningfully deployed, purposefully sort of given to colleagues and to children, so that they are used really, really well. And then we don't end up with those negative associations. We don't end up with people sort of disenchanted with all of these big promises that technology is going to be a solution to everything, which is not helpful either. What we want is empowerment. We want a sense of, right, well, now we can do this, and now we can solve this problem, now we can improve this solution, rather than okay, well, we've got the devices now, what do we do? That tail wagging the dog thing isn't helpful either. So really, I think a holistic approach is key. We've got to get past negative associations around COVID. Actually, I think for me, there has to be a sort of healing moment somehow in the technology sense of things. There are a lot of people who had a really terrible time. I absolutely accept and recognize that. But we can't keep using the terrible time to justify ongoing terrible times. It needs now to be turned around with a real sense of direction, a sense of learning, and I suppose momentum now in a new trajectory, because this sort of lurching from one solution to another, one kind of sticking plaster approach to another, like, that's not good enough. Children deserve better, and there are too many kids disconnected, too many kids disadvantaged, and I don't think that's good enough. I think as a country that's in theory leveling up, we owe our young people a much more connected and empowered set of opportunities in school than they're sometimes too often getting at the minute. So yeah, I think it's ripe for change.
Just to give a shout out, Claire's been watching and said very true. She agrees with you, Laura, on YouTube. Thanks very much, by the way, everybody watching. We've had 579 people watching so far, so thank you very much indeed to those people who have clicked to watch. And also, it might be probably a good time that if you are connecting, it's a good word to use, with anything that's being said here, and you want to find out more about the conversation we're having, perhaps about one-to-one devices, but even more so just about the sort of opportunities, if you like, for technology within your school, then definitely scan this QR code that's on screen now, and we'll pop it back up later. But if you're interested in finding out more, you can literally just pop your name and email in there, and then either Simon or Sagar or somebody else will get back to you with a bit more information about what we're discussing today. Pass back to you, James.
Thank you. I think, Laura, that culture and empowerment is really key. And you picked up on that earlier, Simon, that it's not just putting a device in the classroom, it's choosing the right device. It's making sure what time that takes. And I want you to have time to explore that a little bit more with us now about what role have you seen and what role do you do within that while working with schools, and what are some of the successes you've seen? Because there are pockets of schools, there are pockets of small village schools in Devon, or they're big academies. And there is a massive disparity within support structures as well. And looking for someone like Easy for You who can help them on that journey of what is possible, of that empowerment, I think is absolutely essential to level up almost. Probably the worst phrase we could use there, Laura, but yeah, you get the idea.
I mean, we very much at Easy for You go down the consultative route. You know, no two schools are the same. To give you a very recent experience I had, I was at a business managers meeting where there were 24 schools present. Now, not one of those 24 school business managers had even heard of a one-to-one device scheme. So that's not Easy for You, it's one-to-one device scheme, which I'll be honest, I was surprised. But that said, once I engaged with those business managers, actually their eyes and ears opened and they were like, wow, actually, you could really help us here. And not just from the sort of student capacity, either, also from a staffing capacity, if you think about staff benefit and helping them as well. So yeah, we are partnered, James, with all the big players. So, you know, and one of the big selling points of us is around our partnerships and service provider status with Microsoft Surface and Dell, which really strengthens our position in the market. There's no third party involvement. We are the trusted supplier. So we go down that route. We will ask multiple questions of the different stakeholders within that school environment about what is going to fit. You know, what is it a financial problem there? You know, do we need to think about bursaries, subsidies? Are you a Chromebook school? Are you a Google school? You know, all these different questions to then narrow down and zone into which device or set of devices we're then going to present to parents on behalf of that school. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely. And it'd be really good for you to go into what offer you do then, the subscription and the criteria and the requirements the school needs to access a service like Easy for You. And almost as you alluded to there, what sets you apart is you are the person. So you go directly to Microsoft, you go directly to Dell and have those conversations, because every school could do a one-to-one scheme with something slightly different because that fits for their context. And having those questions and breaking that down is really important, especially from my experience of working within schools and even within our own academy, because everyone needs to know the why. Why are we doing this? To make sure it not only affects and supports the teaching and raising the standards, but there's a whole host of workflow and efficiencies in that side as well. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about the subscription and how schools can get involved and what sets you apart.
Absolutely. So the subscription itself, James, it's so much more than just what I'd call a kit drop. What the Easy For You offering is supplying is that all-round 360 wraparound support as well. So therefore, in terms of the workload from an internal point of view for IT teams, finance teams, there's very little, if anything. All we're asking for from a school is their support and collaboration in terms of communicating that information out to the parents in order for us to sort of furnish them with the devices. But we will then, once they've chosen the devices, we will prep and do everything around those devices, label the devices. We will build to their environment. So we can do it out of the box, but also if they want to be built into their environment with all the safeguarding information and all that sort of side of thing as well, that device will land at that school on rollout day and be education ready to their specific specification and requirements. We then completely support that device. The device can be rented or purchased. So from a parent's point of view who thinks it's affordable to purchase up front and then include the wraparound Easy For You support, we can do that. However, to make it more affordable for other people as well, other families that might have a few more hardship issues, we would say, right, we can break that down for you over a 2, 3, 4, 5 year period, dependent on the device. But again, with that full wraparound support as well. If anything goes wrong with the devices, James, what we also do is provide education-ready loan devices within that school. Okay, so the student has a problem with that device, they will go to Mr. or Mrs. IT, and he or she will then get out a replacement device that's ready to go. So there's a zero lost learning time as well. And that's all included within that subscription. Sagar, have you got anything to add that I might have missed?
Can I, before Sagar comes in, can I just say that is the complete polar opposite from when I was in school, where it was just like, here's a trolley of just completely damaged and graffitied machines without even plug sockets on them. Please do something with them. And they just like push it into a room, like 2 would fall on the floor, and then that would be it. So yeah, it's quite refreshing to hear that things have moved on significantly since those Halicon days.
So with the subscription itself, from my perspective, when I was an IT manager, like you've mentioned, Tom, with the trolleys that would be there, there's the maintenance around those. Cable management was anything to do with a trolley, and cable management was just a dirty word. Every term it would be a mess. Devices wouldn't be charged, meaning that they wouldn't be used for the next lesson because they didn't all work. There was some real challenges around that, and part of this whole personalized learning that approach that has been moved more and more into education, having a one-to-one device is, an extension of your pencil case essentially. But with these trolley devices, the batteries are nowhere in the same condition. So though you may need to use it for a double lesson, you're probably getting maybe 10-15 minutes after you've spent that time waiting to log in. Lots of my friends that are teachers have always said, why am I sitting here for 10 minutes just to log in? I've wasted lesson time. Going down this personalized route means that device is always being used. The login times are super efficient, and that device is personalized to that learning journey for not only the staff member, but also for the student too, that they have the right software and all the access to those tools. So that to me is really powerful. It means that lesson time, and it's so tight in terms of the timetable. I have a school that has a 2-week timetable, and literally the kids have minutes to get to a lesson, to then get their device out, to then get started. And the whole Easy For You approach really takes care of that process, gives them an efficient device that's right for their learning journey, whether it's fully detachable, if that's the requirement, whether it's a 2-in-1 that means they need to have touch, but also that traditional laptop feel. But the configuration side of things, me as an IT manager, it'll be a big task to make sure during the summer, with everything else that's going on, room changes, moving offices around, all those bits that kind of filter with new staff coming in as well, that we have a project to make sure these devices are prepped and ready and labeled and configured. And if I had something like EasyView at the time, it means that I could have not only EasyView take care of the support and the setup of those devices, my team internally can concentrate on the things that really matter. So the learning, how we actually make the system better, that makes it more engaging for students and for staff for generating content. I know September, which is fast paced, I needed my team out on the help desk. I needed them actually to talk to staff, talk to the new students, to make sure, do you know where all the systems are? Actually being useful in guiding them, because it's, for a child entering their first element of senior school, there's, they've got new rooms, bigger buildings, bigger students, new teachers, new faces, and then they've got to navigate this sort of device thing too. Having us as support to do that, meaning that, that we can focus EasyView to actually put those devices together and make sure they're fully protected, was really important. The thing
if
is,
I was to, sorry, Sergio, just to cut in, imagine, I'm still teaching now part-time history, right? And my school doesn't have any sort of one-to-one. Well, actually, they do actually, but not in the way you're describing. But I'm saying that if for example, I'm in a class and I'm in EasyView school, and the students, whether the devices are in the classroom or the students have them and they're bringing them or whatever, if you were to sort of characterize in a very, and either Simon or Sagar, feel free to jump in on it, but if you were to characterize that in 2 or 3 sentences, how do you make sure that I, as a teacher, don't have to worry? How do you, obviously you can't mitigate all risks because there's always going to be something, but how do you make sure that a really high percentage of those devices every lesson are functioning and they're ready to go,
So that's a bit of a combination between EasyView and the school. So the
Right.
IT perspective would be the support would continue, but they wouldn't be bogged down with the hardware management of those devices. They'll be able to essentially be out in the rooms to support if, my keyboard stopped working,
Yeah.
I'll pop over to IT. But in terms of September, usually
Yeah.
I'd have teams sitting there waiting to hand out devices. Now I can actually utilize them to their full potential to be in those classrooms, because the EasyView team, as part of that digital handout, is there on site. So it's the extra resources that I didn't have. So in terms of schools that have really small IT teams, if not a bi-weekly engineer that may turn up to then have a big list of things, and that list never gets done because they've been pulled pillar to post for things that are happening there and then, because that's how schools operate. It's important now, not 2 weeks ago when that projector needed repair and all that device needed looking at. So it gives me the extra resources to focus my team to make sure we do a great job and make sure teaching and learning is paramount, while they handle the device handouts and making sure that the right level of stock is on site for those events of failures, which for me as an IT leader, being able to go to a student, it's okay, I know you've dropped your device, don't worry about it, take this device, it's all set up, ready to go, they can carry on and work, and then we handle that thing in the back end with EasyView. Makes it far easier because it's so simple in terms of reporting a fault. The beauty, again, of why I joined EasyView was that they understand, and we as a business understand, that IT managers, IT engineers that are in these schools, they know what they're talking about. It's not a script. We simply accept what those engineers are telling us because they understand it and we understand them. So we're able to have faster turnaround in terms of how we deliver an effective service. And I think that's really powerful. And that's just on the IT perspective. There's a whole financial element for schools too that we should certainly talk about. Si, anything else that you think I've missed?
Yeah, I think just in terms of the original rollout, Tom, to expand on Sagar's answer, what we would do through conversations with the school is learn about that environment and then integrate as they wish. What we would then do is do that on one device for them. That device would be sent out to the IT team within that educational institution. They would basically give the thumbs up, and then we would roll that out across X amount of devices, whatever that looks like. So we are then belt and braces that they're happy that we've set up to their exact requirements. And of course, they've then got the loan devices there as well as a backup.
Got you. No, that makes perfect sense.
And I think that resourcing of having the amount of people focusing on the deployment and working really closely within the IT team at school, as well as the teachers and leaders, is paramount to roll out any one-to-one scheme. And you're talking about time saving and making sure you have spare devices. There is no lost learning. It's a really nice approach to actually, we don't have to worry as a teacher. You can get on and focus on those core bits. I think
James, could I also add, in terms of me as an IT member, we turned into a bit of a repair shop. So you'd have one-to-one really successful for the first year. Year 2 comes in, so you're expanding on that, but not necessarily the staff isn't expanding, and we're now starting to get breakages. And how we manage that internally, whether on a financial perspective, do I go through an insurance company, which has super expensive price tag associated with that? How do I then manage that? Do I self-insure as a school, and do we take kind of a risk? That's a super scary place to be in too. And with the whole wraparound, it's just taken care of. It makes it so much easier. But what it means again is we can do all those successful things as an IT team without them becoming a repair centre on top of everything else that we need to do. And schools, I feel, at least in my experience, haven't been adequately staffed for IT. If it works really well, IT can do it. And that's not the thing. The reason it works well is we have the right staff and the right people, the right consultants, all those people that build up this puzzle, this big picture on making it a success. And this is what we're trying to do, which is, no, actually, let us handle this so you can stay on target for what you really are there to do.
And it's focusing on that teaching and learning and the impact. And it's getting that, it's getting those foundations, it's getting those pillars right within school and making sure that those ebb and flow. And one of the things I sat down and calculated the other day, and I can't remember which one of you said this earlier about logging in. If a child spends 5 minutes every day logging into something, over the course of the year, that's 2 days of lost learning. And now we've got a massive push on attendance of actually spending that time. Having a device that's there and there is no lost learning is huge. But I want to build a little bit going from this is that financial element of it. And I think it interlinks with a lot of what you've said, actually, building into the budget, having a subscription model, and those elements are really important because we shouldn't have devices that are just sat there. The security risk on them is huge. The cyber security, you've just seen in the news last few days, some of the massive amount of thing. I had an incident today where we were very preemptive that a teacher was tried to be hacked in while they weren't even in Egypt, but someone in Egypt. But because we had the measures in place, we could stop it straight away. And I think if you didn't have up-to-date devices, that's a big security risk as well within it all. So can you just give us a little bit more information about that financial element of it? And because there are constraints on schools' budgets, but we can actually be clever. And there is a lot of money-saving tips within schools where having digital devices means that teachers don't need to go and waste time photocopying endless sheets or sticking paper on paper. And I think there are so many more efficiencies that I know we'll talk about in a little bit more, but understanding that financial model would be really important. So Simon or Sagar, I'll let you two decide.
While they're doing that, I will say that we've just hit 1,000 viewers. So thanks everybody who is checking in and watching this. It's a fantastic conversation. I'm enjoying it a lot, especially reminiscing about the old days when it was appalling. So yeah, a massive, and also a shout out to those people watching on YouTube. Natalie's commented, Natalie Pace, thank you, on X, sorry. We've got Eel Show, apologies if that's not how you pronounce your name. I'm doing my very best. And thank you so much for watching this on YouTube and giving us a thumbs up. So yeah, I'll pass back to Simon or Sagar on that now.
Thanks. So if we look at in terms of the subscription, so the way we set up is through a bespoke web shop, and that then allows either full outright purchase or a rent. And I use the word rent and not lease because we do things a bit differently, because we want to make this affordable for all. So we don't require for a rental credit checks to make that truly affordable, no matter what financial circumstances. The way someone would engage in a rental is simply put is we would ask for an initial deposit to secure that device, and then from there we would then look to produce that device and then roll that device out based on the school's nominated day for rollout, whether that's to be sent directly to the parent's home, or actually would like to do a real big sort of day induction to not only explain how the school works, but also the expectations of this technology, how it'll be used, how you'll be safely looked after. And that's sort of a collaboration between ourselves as EasyFew and the school on how that's being delivered based on their infrastructure and their system they have in place. At the end of that subscription, with all that lovely 360 cover, we would then reach out to those people that have rented those devices to ask a simple question. Would you like to hold on to it? Because the battery service has been held up on that device, so it's in still the same great working order as you first received it. From there, it's yes, we would, and then we simply retain that deposit to sort of finalize the transfer of that device. If they say no, actually, we would like to go into the next scheme because we're going into A-level and we need something a bit more hardware in, we would then look to collect that device. We would then do some fair wear and tear checks, and we would then return that deposit, which they can then put into another scheme or take into their next stage of what they're doing. But we make sure that the scheme is fully accessible as part of that everyone has a chance to have great technology without it costing them the earth.
And just one question with that. Is it a school that do the subscription and pay for it, or is it a parental contribution, or is there a hybrid depending on the schools and what you offer as well?
So it depends on the school. Some schools go, well, actually, we are putting that into our school fees, and that will sit within there. So it means that that's covered as part of, you come to our institution, and part of that, here's the range of tools that you'll be provided as part of that. And then that is managed by us with the school directly. For schools that choose that actually they want to extend that to the parents directly, we then work with those parents directly. They will make the purchase or the rental through us, and then that management process is directly with them. So a crude way to put it is a bit like a uniform shop. They would purchase through our portal, and then from there we would manage that whole process in terms of support around the hardware of that device with the parent. But the benefit of that is also the school at any point can support those devices by logging those support tickets for those parents and those students on their behalf.
And the other part as well, James, is, if we are going, or the school chooses to go via the parent option, and the emphasis is with the parent, the contracts, let's call it. However, from an affordability point of view, if a school chooses to also help out for any hardship issues or across the board, then they can also do that and subsidise that. So whether that be 10% or the upfront deposit, there's options around there for the school to make a decision to help those parents if need be.
Excellent. So we've talked a lot about previously we were rolling out kind of sets of devices or things like that. And the difference with one-to-one can be absolutely huge. And often there's some obvious benefits. Everyone's got a device, they can use it when they need to, but there are often some hidden benefits of that as well, and things like accessibility. And so, Laura, I wonder from your experience of looking at digital strategies within school and implementation of technology, what are some of those top benefits that you have seen that may not be completely obvious in the first instance? And so, for example, one of the ones that I kind of just alluded to is the amount of time saved for children to access technology, and the fact that gives teachers time to really focus and have those conversations with children and really challenge them and add that depth to learning that we really want to do, rather than go too fast paced over things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's technology allows us to smooth out some of those long-winded processes. I really don't miss standing by the photocopier. I used to spend a lot of time there and don't at all anymore. In fact, to the point where I forgot my photocopying code altogether, which was a surreal experience. But not spending time on cutting and sticking pointless stuff. I mean, I call it Pritt stick time. It's just so liberating to get past that and to really make better use of those precious minutes of lesson time for the relationship building, the content, the knowledge, the schema, the skills. So I think that that's a really powerful thing. Just a quick anecdote. I did a lovely activity today with 2 of my year 8 classes where, as part of our sort of training process for new staff, we like to do some onboarding and show them some best practice of how we do digital learning at my school. And we're a Microsoft school. We use OneNote as one of the main vehicles for our teaching and learning. And I invited all of my year 8 kids to choose their favorite OneNote pages from the year and to share them with me in a collaboration space. And it was just the most uplifting thing for them to look back through their learning for the whole year, which was all there in front of them. They could see and access everything, all their teacher feedback, the whole piece. Like, there are so many children for whom a file, an exercise book is such an ephemeral thing. It's permanently lost, or it's covered in Ribena, or it's, underneath the cat.
Laura, please stop. Don't talk about me on this. All right, it's not on at all.
I'm so sorry.
My professional life is off limits for this. All right.
I make no apologies, Tom. But what I think is really interesting is just the ability to not lose your work is so freeing for all of those students for whom organisation is not the easiest. I'm not looking at anyone here, but for all of those
our teachers in as well. Teachers with poor organisation, yeah,
right. Where sometimes everything just feels it's slightly out of your grasp, and you've always left that book or that exercise book or that file at the other place that you're supposed to be. It's lovely to have everything with you all the time. I don't know anybody who misses carrying around stacks of exercise books. That's done for us as well. We don't have to do that anymore. And if you just want to mark 3, you can mark 3 and then do 5 more later, because you're not carrying the stack around. You don't have to commit to all of it. So I think increased flexibility for teachers, much more speed and consistency, visibility as well for middle leaders too, I think is not something to be underestimated. When you have access to all the learning all the time, whether you're a teacher or a student or a head of department or even a parent, that suddenly gives you this sense of perspective about progress, about habits, about what's really happening. Because when you're teaching purely on paper, you only really get a sense of the whole collective of the body of learning of a child when you get everything in your hand at once with their whole file or whatever it is. And that's impossible. Like the back end of year 13 or the back end of year 11, there's a lot of stuff. And so to get that sort of zoomed out perspective, it's not very easy in an analog way. And I think digital allows us to do that. But I also think there are so many other opportunities for sharing of good practice, for reducing the amount of teacher time spent on the mechanics of planning, distributing work to students, taking it back in again, marking and assessing and feeding back, and then all of those conversational loops. All of that can be smoothed out, made faster, made easier, made more consistent, made higher standards, because technology is a lever for improvement. And so especially in schools where leaders are looking to raise standards, where leaders are looking to perhaps promote a particular approach or improve a particular outcome for young people, I think technology is the most amazing vehicle for doing that. And to be able to do so while potentially reducing workload, increasing collaboration, like where's the negative?
And I think part of it is that perception as well. I'll hand over to Tom and then we will dive into that a little bit.
Listen, I'm enjoying it, but I just thought now would be a very good moment to say that if you are intrigued by what Laura is saying, and if you are the teacher like me, who just leaves a trail of devastating disorganization everywhere you go, then actually de-papering your school, might be decluttering your mind, and also your school. And I think there's a lot in what Laura said that I was very much in agreement with. I've never actually experienced it myself, but perhaps you would like to. And if that is you, and you're interested in exploring at least this whole avenue of one-to-one devices across your school, then Easy for You is the place. And you can literally scan that QR code that's on screen now. It'll take you to the contact page on the Easy for You website, where Simon or Sagar or one of the team can chat to you about everything that Easy for You can deliver. We've already talked about the infrastructure around it. It's not just one-to-one devices. If you're looking for support from a computing point of view in your school, then definitely reach out to them and say hi.
And so I think we alluded to earlier, we all came into this with, we saw the perception and we saw the opportunity that technology gives. And one of the things with my oldest, he's only 6, so and he went into year 1, and his writing, he had to, in maths especially, you'll see this a lot in primary schools where they're doing problem solving, and yes, you've got the manipulatives out there, but you're asking them to justify their answers, and we're using writing as a medium to showcase their learning. Well, learning like that hasn't really changed over the last 100 years. We're still using writing as a medium. And yes, we do need to write. I'm not saying get rid of it, but as a vehicle for change, it's really important. And I think there is this huge perception, not only from teachers about, actually, when you get technology, they're on it all day, or they're just researching, but actually from parents as well. And I think there's a whole element of it. And so from the Oracy point of view, I was in a school this morning talking to early years teachers, and they were just thought I would come in and say, right, technology, we've got to do it this way and that way. But the incidental conversations we had around taking photographs or putting 3D models in there, and the language and the motivation from the children and what we could do to challenge them, it's going to be really, really powerful. And they were enthusiastic. They were engaged themselves as teachers, and actually really want to dive into opportunities that the technology is almost invisible. It's there, as you say, as a vehicle. And I think that is really key.
I wanted to build on that, if it's all right, James, because I think one of the things that's really interesting to me here is about how you can elevate the whole experience of answering a question or proving that you have a skill or some knowledge, using tech to make that so much more rich and experiential. I think bringing that whole process of evidencing learning to life is really interesting, especially when you then create this beautiful portfolio of video and audio and photographs and, of course, capturing writing, but it doesn't just have to be that. And I don't think it's helpful for learners to see learning just in that very one-dimensional way, when there's so much more richness that they can indeed capture, share, iterate, develop, kind of collaborate on. So yeah, there's more to life than Blue Biro or HB pencil, like, depending. But can I add one more thing while I'm here?
Yeah, of course.
Because I want to just go back to something, because I feel like this is it's a false binary where people imagine that if you're going to be pro technology, that you're anti handwriting. And I just want to say no. No, we've gone past. We're not talking about word processors, friends. Like, we've got past that point, and there are loads of devices that offer digital ink as kind of core to the digital experience. And I think if a school is looking at harnessing those kinds of capabilities and having both keyboard entry and digital ink and finger and all the rest of it as opportunities to interact with the tech, it means you have the best of all the worlds. And vast majority of devices have a camera on them, so anything that you do capture digitally that has been done in an analog way, you can then video it, photograph it, make a podcast about it, do whatever you want. It doesn't just have to exist in that original form. So I think one of the questions to ask then is, where does the learning live, and what does it need to look like? We need to let go of these old false proxies, which frankly are a bit tired, and think again about what the process of learning looks like and how we can evidence and celebrate that. But then also consider how we assess the learning at the end of it too. And I think, this is another interest of mine regarding AI, but particularly as we head into an era where AI is much more prevalent in our conversations around assessment and understanding of learning, we've got to think big around that. And I think just opening the door to digital opportunity is the way to do that, because you put that technology and the confidence to know which tools to use and how to explore them in the hands of teachers, and brilliant things will happen.
And I've been working with some teachers recently, and we looked at that, and they talked about this idea that the children's work they find it more authentic because they have their own digital device. They're not copying, they're not writing on paper. Actually, they have an opportunity to express. And a year 3 child I spoke to said when they were doing poetry, they liked writing it, that it was there. They had lots of the visuals to support them. But out of their mouth, and I didn't set this up, was they wanted to perform it, which they did over video, because you can hear the articulation from the author, and they were the author. And I thought, how fascinating is that? How can you just take something like that, share it with your family, share it with your friends, and have that practice? And I know I had a child when I was in year 5 who wouldn't say a word in class, but at one lunchtime with a green screen and doing some video, they had an amazing news piece they did in our class assembly at the front, and it was in front of the whole school, 600 children, and plus the parents. And it just seeing his face light up, and those opportunities can be exceptional, just having the right devices and the right way of thinking as well. And I think it'd be really good to go build a little bit into the 2 kind of themes I want to talk about. And I think one of them is this opportunity of accessible learning, and how technology really makes for every single pupil learning accessible. And the way I talk about it is, think about crossing a road. When you cross a road, you've got the bumps on the ground, which are useful for anyone just to know, right, that's where you're crossing. You've got the crossing, you've got the button to click, you've got the green man coming up. But if you think for a ramp, well, it's ramped down. Well, that's good for a mother or father with a pram, or it's good for a wheelchair. The drop curb is there. If you're hard of hearing, well, therefore you've got the spinny bit underneath, and you've got the green man. And I come back to this idea of technology where you can put, like Microsoft and Apple have like immersive readers and screen readers, or they've got this element of, especially dyslexia, and you have those colored overlays. And because these tools are so inbuilt and they are so there, no one's sticking out like a sore thumb. And I think when I first started my education career, I had a child who I worked with who had hard of sight, and she sat there, massive screen, massive monitor, and stood out. And I think the fact that we have those accessibility things. So I wondered from Simon and Sagar, Laura, what experiences you've seen of actually how this technology has really transformed a child's access to learning, and how that's actually given them a voice and the confidence to find their own place. And wondered if you've got any first-hand experience of that.
Yeah, I'm very happy to as well. Sagar, do you want to start us off?
Sure. So there's been a few things, and I've been really lucky being in schools where there's been some great teachers that have really seen an avenue for a piece of technology. So Microsoft's Reading Coach, incredible, just incredible how it's taken a child that is super shy, has not probably the best reading ability that they need compared to their peers, and it's brought them along subtly, quietly, allowed the staff member to really nurture them with a personalized plan to get their reading ability better. And to add on from that, they weren't a particularly confident writer, and they needed to proofread their work, and using dictation and then using immersive reader to hear that back and go, oh, I've made a mistake there, and then to find the right word for that. So powerful. But just to watch over a term where we put a Surface device into a child's hand from a parent that had a conversation with, said, don't really know what to do with my child, what's out there, to then having the parent at the end of the term come back to me and go, it has changed my child's life. And I saw them actually about a month ago going in to see a customer, and bumped into them, and I'm trying not to use their name. and he's a tall human and super confident, and still remembers, oh yeah, when we use that, it's great. I now do this with it. And to me, I'm a parent. I've got two. I've got a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I just think, right, I've got these tools now that I can actually try to help them along with that journey and make them more confident, because that's what you want the technology to do, right? You want them to be confident in any aspect of life. So yeah, that's my snapshot of what I've seen.
Yeah, that's really great, Sigar. I think I was going to mention, I mean, I believe quite passionately that if you raise the bar in terms of accessibility, everybody benefits. Like, it's just whether you, strictly speaking, need anything particularly accessible or not. I think everybody finds that creates a more inclusive classroom culture, but it also opens up opportunities for engagement that people didn't even know were there. So I've noticed it with all sorts of tools with Microsoft, with Immersive Reader and various other personalization things that you can use in OneNote and Teams, including things like transcripts and that kind of stuff, where you open up that possibility, and actually you find that your autistic child who struggles with auditory processing just likes to have the subtitles on, that kind of thing. So I think there's something really interesting about making those opportunities available, but not necessarily just holding on to them as a teacher. I think it's then about giving agency to the pupils so that they understand the range of tools that are available, and they can make good choices themselves too about how to deploy them for their own benefit. I've just, there's a really interesting question that's coming. Can we deal with that, James? Can we go with that one? Because that's cool.
Yes.
So
let's do that.
Christopher's just asked, I'm interested to know how you deal with the inherent temporariness, beautiful word, of online learning evidence. How do you ensure all digitally generated work is effectively archived? I love this question, and it's something that comes up a lot for us. Can I dive right into answering?
Dive into it, and then I can talk about our approach if need be as well.
Lovely. So I think that you have to make a really conscious choice to decide where the learning lives. And once you've decided it, you then have to make sure that the learning lives there. And in whatever means that helps you get the learning to that place, you do that as part of your classroom routine. So if you are doing things on paper, but the learning lives in OneNote, there has to be a moment where we take photos of the work, and then the paper gets recycled, but the work is in the right place. Now, a lot of this actually then comes down to the architecture, the organization of systems and processes and routines and all of those things in school. And I really, really strongly say, happy-go-lucky is not the strong approach here. Free and organic and kind of letting everybody do their own thing, terrible idea, terrible, because the children don't know what's the which way is up. It's much better to take a school-wide approach to this, so that you don't have a different system according to Mrs. So-and-so and Mr. So-and-so. Everybody knows where everything goes. We all have the same expectations about where learning lives, and that's how we go for it. And I think then you have to have a nice, solid, robust process in place, so that each year there's an archiving of those things. You can go back and see your old work and move on to the new work next year. So there's this gradual building, but it needs to be safe, secure, backed up, easy to find, and nicely transparent, so everyone knows where to find it, consistent too.
And I have to completely echo that. And someone called me the other day meticulous. And there's a reason why you've got to be meticulous. Yes. Because not only for the cognitive load of the teachers, but for the pupils as well. Oh my gosh,
the pupils. If there's a different rule for every teacher, nobody knows where they're at. And then you just become indifferent. Because why would you make the effort to learn 15 different systems? That's ridiculous.
And it's also for the leaders. And I think there is still this, because some leaders are not necessarily teaching all the time and they haven't got a full timetable, actually getting used to the digital systems can be quite a lot for them if they're only using them once or twice a week, and embedding that. And the fact that if they can see what that learning journey looks like, see that progress over time, and making sure that is consistent is absolutely quintessentially important. And that's where having one-to-one schemes where we are tackling that digital poverty, where we are promoting that digital literacy and saving and all of this and making it accessible is absolutely paramount.
But I think just to build on that final point, and I think this is where Easy For You has a lot to offer, is that if you're putting in place a scheme that's consistent for every child, so it's one up from your kind of bring your own device and hope for the best option, you're getting a minimum standard in place for every child in your school pupil premium doesn't matter, SEND doesn't matter, top of the class doesn't matter. Like, everybody gets the same thing. And that, in terms of creating those expectations and those systems and processes, is gold. Too often the child who is poorly equipped, or the child who, you know, always forgets their pen, is the same child who's not going to have their device charged, or isn't going to, you know, have remembered to organize whatever. So I think the more consistency we can put in place, the more we raise the bar.
Brilliant. Listen, I mean, I could listen to you talk about this all day, Laura, to be honest with you. It's been really fascinating, and from Sagar and Simon, amazing. So yeah, just to sort of emphasize to everyone, because unfortunately we're sort of running out of time, because this could go on all day and it would still be great. But I did have a final question for everyone, which I'm going to pitch now, and it's literally a 30-second answer that I'm looking for. Which is, if someone has got to the end of this show and they're still skeptical and they're still saying, listen, you know, I just can't do it. What one thing would you say to them to persuade them, just from the heart, that digitizing and getting one-to-one devices is the way forward? What would each of you say? Because you're all advocates for it. But if I was to just ask you, you've only got one chance, you've got one sentence to say to them, what is it? I'll start with you. Well, who wants to go first? I don't want to put anyone on the spot.
And I could do, if you
yeah,
like, give
on,
the others some time. So I'm pretty brutal on this, actually. And I think that anyone who is still at this point unconvinced needs to go and visit schools where it's happening, and it's happening well. And then I think they need to really look at themselves and ask the question, well, how long do our students have to wait before they get the same opportunities as their peers elsewhere in this country, in order to thrive and flourish in their learning? Why do our students have to wait? How long do they have to wait? I think I'd be asking that tough question.
It's pretty strong. Anyone want to? Simon, do you want to jump in next?
Sure, yeah. I think I'll expand on what Laura said earlier on this evening around, you know, the pandemic, and almost saying, right, let's park that and move on now. You know, it was a very challenging time. It highlighted a very big problem. And I think now is time to sort of let's remove all those barriers and empower all our students and our children, regardless of background, to be able to navigate a technology-dependent future, and to be able to do it with real confidence.
Brilliant. And Sagar, do you want to add, or have they covered everything you would say? If you can unmute.
They nearly.
I feel like I've said that about 50 million times tonight. I'm working with IT people here. I'm a history teacher. I should be the one who you're like, you know, directing all the time to do it.
I think just everything that's been covered, is exactly where we need to be. But for me, it's, you want to give everyone that opportunity to get the best for future employment, for their next stage in terms of education. So you want to prep them for the real world, and by limiting access to these tools to support their aspirations, their passions, you know, you're really doing a disservice. So I think everyone goes into teaching because they want to make good change for the benefit of all, and technology is, you know, is at the core of that now. We need to make sure that our future leaders are given the right tools so they can succeed, and succeed greatly.
The final word for me is, if you are interested in anything we've talked about today, then all you have to do is point your phone at the QR code that's on screen and get involved with Easy for You. Have a chat with Simon or Sagar about what we've been discussing tonight by just scanning the QR code, or just visiting them at their website, which is easyforyou.school. Huge thanks to Sagar, Simon and Laura, and of course my amazing co-host James. Huge big shout out to everyone that's got involved in the comments tonight. We've had nearly 2,000 live viewers so far, so it's absolutely amazing to see so many people interested in the digital divide, interested in digital technology, and how that is being put out across schools. So that's really heartening to see that. A massive shout as well, the final one, to Lucy behind the scenes, who is one of our amazingly loyal TTR team members, who's been keeping all this ticking along in the background. So big shout out to her as well. And of course, to Easy For You. If you're interested in finding out more, this is going to be available as a podcast very soon on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. It'll also sit on YouTube. So if there's somebody else in your school or community where you think this would be a useful conversation for them to hear, then please pass it on. Keep the conversation going. And I think it's an important one. So with that, it's only for me and everybody to wave because we're not going to bother with the unmuting rubbish. And just to say goodbye, good night, adios.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.